Ah, yes. It's baseball things.
And the pitch is swung on and drilled high and deep down the left field line. If it stays fair, it's out of here.
High fly, left center. They're giving up on it because this is gone!
High ball hit into deep center field. Cameron going back to the track, to the wall, makes the leap, and makes the catch!
Here's Jason A. Churchill.
As I teased earlier in the week here on Baseball Things, a little bit of a surprise. We're going to have a little fun here. The Mariners had a fun season. The Mariners broke down some walls. The Mariners, they did some things that we've been waiting for this team to do for a long time. And we're going to do something here that a lot of you have been waiting for a long, long time. I have a special guest on this particular episode of the podcast.
Play music.
Beautiful. Here we are. Mr. Steve Sandmeyer. I promised, Steve, I have to tell you this. I promised 5 years ago when I started this show, I promised if the Mariners ever got into the postseason, at the very, very least, I would ask you to come on. And seeing you all this time, because you've moved on in your life, you've moved on from the broadcast world, and you've turned down dozens and dozens and dozens of questions and asking inquiries. Hey, Steve, come on our show. You know, would it be Mitch or commercial radio? And I'm like, I'm still going to ask him. If the Mariners finally get in, that's the time I'm going to ask Steve Sandmeyer. And when did I ask you, Steve? When did I ask you about this?
We went to the game when I think it was pretty much the last time Kelnick had a hit. No, it's when he hit his 2 home runs on the Thursday night game on the 29th against the Rangers. And I want your listeners to know that you were, I wouldn't say you were sheepish, but you were a little bit nervous even asking me. Like, I didn't even know what the hell you were going to ask me. Mm-hmm. And like, you just kind of mumbled it. You're like, oh, I don't even know if I want to ask you this. I'm like,
I wasn't sure because you know what? It wasn't really fear of rejection. It was fear of finality. I think it was because if you say, you know what, I totally would have respected it. It would have been totally fine, but it would have been like, I can really never ask.
Oh, that's like, BS.
That's it.
Listen. Oh, that's such BS. You know, you set me up. You got a couple pops in me. You did the little hung puppy dog look. What the hell was I going to say? No, I mean, I had no choice. I was vulnerable. You took advantage. And it's funny you started out saying, well, I made this promise that if the Mariners made the postseason, you know, we do. I made a promise 6 years ago when you and I stopped doing our podcast that I would never do any of this stuff again. Right. No podcast, no broadcast, no nothing. So you were able to fulfill a promise, and then I broke a promise. So here I am. So don't F this one up, okay? This is it.
we met for a couple of drinks before the game. At where do we go? Hooverville. And I didn't ask you then. To be honest with you, I don't know if consciously I waited until you had a couple in you, but that is the way that it worked out. So I'm going to take credit for that. I think that was a brilliant strategy by yours truly.
You are manipulative and a sociopath. Congrats.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, you've been telling me that for years, and I think I finally believe you.
No, but dude, seriously, like, I had not seen you in person literally since we did a podcast together, and we actually had to look it up. I mean, oddly enough, I know it's going to come as a huge shock. I know Jason does a lot of prep work for these. I clearly don't, but I did ask him, I'm like, when was the last time that we did a podcast together? And it was August of 2016. So
August 17, 2016.
In 6 years, this is the first of anything I've done. Like I said, podcast or broadcast. So I'm going to be super rusty. Okay. I'm going to be way ahead of the changeup. I'm going to be bailing out on sliders. I mean, it's going to be ugly.
So to remind some listeners that were with us during the Sandmeyer and Churchill days, it was the Josias Manzanillo episode, number 41. That was the last time Steve was on a podcast or commercial radio. So I do appreciate it, Steve. I know you did, quote unquote, break a promise. I don't feel bad about that part. I do feel a little bad that I waited until you almost had no choice. I almost, let's say it this way. I almost feel bad about it. I don't, because you know what, Steve, you're an adult, sort of. I'm an adult, sort of. And here you are, and I got you. So I promised over 5 years ago that I would at least ask. That's the least that I could do. And here you are, and I know a lot of folks are going to get a kick out of this. So
here we are.
So something I've been asking a lot of, this is obviously a long time coming, 20 plus years. We're 21 years beyond the last time, this baseball team made the playoffs. And we've talked for years about how do they get over the hump. I remember that the 2013 team, the 2014 team, the 2015 team, and a couple of those teams came a little closer than the others. And then the 2018 team, and then last year, just coming up short. And that seemed to be the story of this franchise. Even when they get into the postseason, so they come up a little short. I've been asking a lot of folks, though, where were you when Cal Raleigh's home run to walk it off on Friday to win 2-1 to finally, clinch and send this team to the postseason? Like, where were you? Like, what was your first reaction, when that happened? It was probably a lot like Cal Raleigh's actual reaction when he realized what he had just done. But I'm just curious, like, where was your head? Where were your emotions? Were you at home, like sitting on your couch and boom, here you go?
Well, yeah, typical of being rusty after all these years. I went to Thursday's game with you, and then I went to Saturday's game with my son. So the one game I didn't go was the Friday game where Cal Raleigh hits a franchise iconic home run. But I was watching with my son, and that was the best part. We lost our freaking minds. We completely lost our minds, and kind of what it meant and going through all that. Think about it. Like, the definition of a generation is between 20 and 30 years. There's no set number on a generation. It's typically described as a period of time between 20 and 30 years. And then it goes on, really, when you speak of a generation of, okay, a person or people grow older, then they have offspring of their own, right? Well, 21 years ago, I was 28 years old. I was working at 950 KJR. I was covering the Mariner beat. I was doing pre and post game shows, and I was working every single home game, including the postseason. And it was all hectic. And obviously it was a thrill, but I was in my late 20s and I was working. 21 years later, a generation later, offspring of my own, I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. And here we are. So, like, for me, that's kind of, that really puts it into perspective. But then I think, like, how about a lot of people listening right now? They are experiencing this essentially for the first time. Think of your listeners right now in their early 30s. It might have been 10 or 11. Okay, I'm sure they remembered bits and pieces, but this could be really the first time where they understand the complete circle and the full dynamics of this, and they're really experiencing this for the very first time, even though they have, they were great memories, but they were faint memories. Then there are people that are younger than that are, don't even remember 21 years ago. So it's interesting to look at it, and I'm an old man. Oh my God, I'm 49 years old. Where in the hell does the time go? But like, I look at it from perspective of, this is my kid. He's 12 years old. It's wheelhouse age. It's like, oh my God, thank God the All-Star, weekend or week, I should say, is going to be here next year. And thank God this is happening now, because he's going to have that the rest of his life. And I can't imagine all the boys and girls, all the people out there that are going to have that, in addition to the adults. Like, that's how a 21-year absence can galvanize a city and really transcend generations, right? And bring people together. That's the most exciting part for me. And I'm like you. I'm into every pitch of every game, and it's so nice to be rewarded with something at the end of a season. Now, it was kind of a reward last year. That was super exciting. Went down to the last day. We got to see some great heroics, but to actually think that right now, as we record this and as people listen, there is a game at Rogers Center at 107 Pacific on Friday. And like, I'm not going to lie, I'm nervous as hell, right? Like, I don't know what kind of emotions I'm going to feel, but this time around, not having, not being in that industry and not working and not being, 21 years young, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this. Like, I'm going to take my kid out of school early. I don't care if it's a road game. People are like, dude, they're not playing here. Why are you taking them out? I'm like, why aren't you taking them out? No. So I'm taking the kid out of school early. Hell, Friday afternoon at 1:00 was the only time I could get an orthodontist appointment. So, those things happen. And he's going to sit down and we're going to watch the game on Friday. I can't wait.
Yeah, you know what's funny is just a few minutes ago before we connected for this, I use the MLB app on my phone quite a bit to like look at scores and stuff like that, and or look at schedules, and I just pull up the scoreboard and I just swipe right and go from today from Wednesday to Friday. There's no games on Thursday. It's just so strange, Steve, looking at this and going, oh, AL wildcard game one, the Mariners at Blue Jays at 107. It is the weirdest thing. It's weird, man. Like in the very last episode, the previous episode to this, like I don't cuss. I don't swear on the show much. I just don't. I don't really see a point in it. I did to open.
By the way, have I cussed yet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
you should get on that, by the way.
Okay.
It's not disallowed. There are no regulations. There's no FCC. There's no BS like that. You can say what you want. But I dropped an F-bomb in the intro of the previous episode because it was the first one I had done since they clinched. And essentially I was just saying, and I'm going to repeat it, how fucking cool is it to be able to say the Seattle Mariners are in the playoffs? Like, I think it deserves an F-bomb. Like it's strange. It's very foreign, but it's about damn time as well. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't matter if they just go in and get swept. I mean, that would be very, very disappointing, but you get that monkey off your back. The pain is out of the way. And I think it matters that this isn't a team on its last leg too. And I wanted to get to that as well. This is a team just kind of pushing into this. That's on the very, very front side of this, not a team like maybe that 2018 team would have been, Steve, where, guys are getting old, the Canoes and the Cruzes and the Felixes, and it was an older team. This is a younger team with tons of flexibility with the roster, tons of flexibility with the payroll. Like they're just getting started. So I'm kind of on the wagon of like, whatever happens. It'll be disappointing if they lose. It'll be exciting if they win and go on to play the Astros. But like, I'm jacked that this is just the beginning.
Yeah. And what spoke to me was extending Luis Castillo after 9 starts. That happened a lot faster than I was anticipating. And to me, that sent the signal. And we can talk all we want about Julio's Rookie of the Year season and how we're finally seeing this franchise reap the benefits of a combination of trades and free agent acquisitions, plus the homegrown talent on the farm coming up all at the same time. I truly believe that's why all this is happening this year. But the fact that they locked in a guy like Luis Castillo, the fact that obviously the Julio deal, the fact that they're probably going to end up buying out the RBers for Cal Raleigh at some point too, right? Like you can see where it's going. You can see the direction. And you're looking right now, sight unseen. They do nothing. They've got a front four for at least 4 more years of Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, Kirby. That's not even mentioning Emerson Hancock eventually or whatever else they might do. I know I've seen you in the past talk about, God, if you could get like Eduardo Rodriguez from the Tigers for a song, let's think about that. Whatever they end up doing, whatever's Marco's future has, Flex's future, whatever else. The point is like that core that you're talking about is already essentially locked in, right? Like they got the perfect storm of having this homegrown talent have major contributions the same year. They made some pretty big moves in the offseason. And thank God, Eugenio Suarez, like he was the guy that basically saved the Winker deal. I was blown away at how well he played defensively. I obviously didn't watch him every day or knew. I thought he was very consistent. I'm not saying he's a Gold Glove third baseman, but there wasn't a big drop off. Clearly what he was able to do at the plate. But so you get those major acquisitions, and he was supposed to be the secondary piece of that, obviously. Couple that with Julio's Rookie of the Year. Then you get Castillo at the deadline. I mean, look at what happened if they would have finished second and they would have gotten Frankie Montas instead of Luis Castillo. Like the margin was pretty thin, and the fact that the M's went for it and they gave up a lot to get a lot, then they turn around and lock him in. Boy, you're right. This core, and they still need some help, and we can talk probably in the off season, about what pieces they need to add. But to your point, that core, that critical mass, not only is coming back next year, they're coming back for the next several years. And you just can't help but be excited about that.
Yeah. Suarez is a real fun topic because I was talking about this over the weekend when I was away doing the Braves Mets game in Atlanta. One of the things that came up in the car was, who the hell knew Eugenio Suarez was this fun? Like Grant, like I'm usually, can he play though? Like, well, he can play, But who knew he was this good for a clubhouse, this good for team culture? It's like, was he stuck in Cincinnati, or were they just keeping a secret? Or did he actually just bust out of his shell when he came to Seattle? I don't remember seeing any of this kind of stuff. The whole, the good vibes only, the fun, the hair, and still play and show up and be a professional every single day. That's the one thing, Steve, that Suarez and Kyle Seager had that were the same. Like, say what you will about Kyle Seager, and I'm certainly not a fan, certainly the way it ended and some of the other things that happened, but Kyle Seager showed up every day for 11 years and played the game very, very professionally. And Suarez does that, but he brings so much more to the table. Like, it's hard to quantify that, but who saw this coming? I didn't see this coming. I had no idea that he was this kind of a character.
I think Suarez was in a rut in Cincinnati after he got hurt. I think the official word was it was a swimming pool accident when he tore his shoulder up. But you know how baseball has some of its urban legends or whatnot. And believe me, I have no idea. So don't think that I'm trying to start some crap here, start some shit there. I swore. Anyway, I think he was in a rut. That organization obviously was in a death spiral. He was not playing well because when he did try and come back, he was hurt. And I think once he got healthy and once he just had just a new setting, a new scene, and then clearly liked the guys around him, that was a big part. And I'm not going all rosy and saying, well, he came to the Mariners and they're awesome. And, but at the same time, he was in a rut, he was injured, and a change of scenery, it turned out to be exactly what he needed. So again, when you have a season like this, you need a lot of these things on the periphery to kind of fall into place. And that did for him. I mean, you saw him after the game, on Wednesday after the season finale. He was tearing up when they were asking what it meant to him. And the first thing he said was, these guys welcomed me in from day one. These guys welcomed me in from day one. Yeah, it helped to have Winker there, a teammate with him in Cincinnati, whatnot. But he said he felt at home immediately. So where's the credit go? It goes to the manager. Most of the credit goes to the players that are in that clubhouse. And it goes to the organization, obviously, that welcomes them with open arms. And before people say, well, geez, everybody would do that. Not every organization is like that, and not every clubhouse is like that. And you know that better than anyone. I mean, I'm sorry to go in the Wayback Machine, but when I was a bat boy in high school for the visiting teams in the Kingdom, I saw some of the most successful teams, and I would see a fight every other game in that clubhouse with teammates. The Oakland A's of the late 80s, early 90s should have won 3 World Series in a row. They won 1 out of those 3, and they were lucky to do it. I think the Earthquake series in 89 was, and now everyone on your all your young listeners are like, but anyway, you need to have a team that can get along. Because think about it, you normally, not during a weird lockout, preseason. I can't believe I used the word preseason, lockout, spring training. In a normal year, you are with these guys starting in mid-February, and you do not separate from these guys until now. And the playoff teams obviously are with them even longer. So you see these people almost every day more than you do your family. So if you guys can't find a way to get along, it is a huge problem. And I know that's stating the obvious, but I do think, and again, maybe I'm just giddy about everything that's happened the last week. I think these guys genuinely pull for each other and genuinely like each other.
Sure seems like it, man. Really does.
When the first thing you hear out of those guys about Julio is how humble he is, that should tell you something. If there's one person on that team in that clubhouse that should walk around like they own the world, which he kind of does, it would be Julio. And the first thing anyone will tell you is, man, he's just so humble. So again, it takes the right combination of people in that clubhouse.
Yeah, what really got me about Julio, and I want to ask you about the ownership and Jerry DiPoto here before we go, but the thing that convinced me about it, I saw him in 19 and I was convinced that he was different because he struck out in his first at bat in that game. They were down 3-0. He fields a routine fly ball in center field with a huge smile on his face and then turns and starts joking with the left field. I'm like, this kid is different. He's 18 years old. he flailed at a strike 3 and like nothing's phasing him. He's different. But when I was at a game earlier this year, I look down, he's in the batter's box. He walks. As he's walking across the batter's box and starts to go up the first baseline or right there at T-Mobile Park, he leans down to start taking off his gear around his ankle, the ankle protection that he wears. And it flips onto the ground and he takes off the wrist thing. And as he's taking off one of them and the other one's on the ground, the equipment person, the bat boy, whatever, whoever comes out to grab that, started to bend down and grab that off the ground, and he beat them to it. He's like, no, I got this. He reached down and handed it to them. He did not want them to have to reach down for his stuff. No. I'll get this. This is my stuff. The least I can do is hand this to you. And then he patted them on the back before they ran. That simple interaction told me, are we sure Julio Rodriguez is not 42 years old instead of 21 or 63 years old? Because that is an old soul right there. That is a very mature, respectful human being. And I was convinced that not only was he different as a player, but he was different as a person once I started seeing things like that, Steve. I mean, absolutely remarkable. If you're going to hand $200 to $470 million to someone, that's the kind of guy you want to give it to.
Yeah, and obviously if he helps out the bat boy, he's got a soft spot in my heart as a former bat boy.
How about that? Yeah, how about that?
Big credit to him. No, I mean, if you look at and we don't know. I mean, we think we know the guy, but we don't, right? Maybe it was his upbringing. Maybe he and his father, who I would say I don't know. I don't follow other teams obviously as closely as I follow this organization, but it sure seems like we hear on a decent enough regular basis about Julio and his father, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
And maybe that's just the way. The other part is, like, you use the word respect, and I think in this sport it is so misinterpreted because I could not care less about bat flips or dancing around. Like, I think that's what makes the game great. And everyone that says, well, you don't respect the game with the bat flips, all the old curmudgeons, probably half of the Baseball Writers Association of America. But, like I want someone eventually to throw a bat flip so high that they could round the bases before the bat hits the ground. I want, that's what I want in the sport. But to me, the whole idea about respect and doing it the right way is exactly what you just described. And he is the first one out of the dugout to congratulate his teammates. And even when he's hurt, he's out there supporting, his other teammates. That's how you respect the game of baseball. It's not like, oh, I got to pretend I'm not excited after I just, took Ross Stripling 442 feet to left center. Yeah, right. I mentioned him on purpose. I mentioned Ross Stripling on purpose. Okay. So to me, that's what respect is, exactly what you're talking about. If the kid is going to stay humble and hungry, and if he does that, then we are going to look at this extension and we not only are going to say, wow, that was wonderful timing. You're going to think I'm out of my head. We're going to look at it and say it's a bargain. If he continues on this trajectory, I'm talking about as the person and the player, not just the player, but as the person and the player. If he continues on this trajectory, we're going to say this is a bargain. I think he is already keenly aware of the impact he has on this fan base, on the impact he has on baseball's fan base, and the impact that he has on his current teammates, and this is important, his future teammates. I think people are going to absolutely have a special, check mark next to the Mariners if they have an opportunity to come play on the same team as Julio Rodriguez in the future.
And we might see that that play a role and have an impact as early as this winter with the Bogarts and the Trey Turners and the Dansby Swansons and the Brandon Nimmo's and Carlos Correas and guys like that. Absolutely. If you're a Mariners fan, you're hoping that's certainly the case this winter. Steve, the Mariners ownership over the years has taken a beating. They've earned that, I think. Sometimes it's baseball related. Sometimes it's legit money related. Sometimes it's opening your big trap about putting a basketball arena south of what was then Safeco Field. They seem to shoot themselves in the foot a lot. For the last 5-6 years now, we've had a different group kind of running things, and it's been relatively quiet. We had the Kevin Mather kind of thing kind of blow up, and I don't really love how Stanton handled that, but they did clear themselves of Mather. In terms of the product on the field, we talked about it a little bit ago. Luis Castillo extension, they signed Robbie Ray. Julio, they get that deal done. Have you turned a corner at all on this ownership group? That's, it's led by Stan, but Chris Larson's obviously heavily involved, and those two are probably the two largest in terms of money and stakeholders, if you will, for this organization. But are they starting to, at the very least, kind of earning some respect in this community with the commitment to winning? I understand they still haven't spent $200 million on payroll or anything, but when you go out and you sign a $115 million free agent, one of the best free agents in baseball, and then you extend your young player for as much as $470 million, for over $200 million guaranteed, and then you trade for a player and then extend him, what did you say, 9 starts in for over $100 million. I imagine you're starting to build you're starting to gain some credibility. You're starting to build some cachet with the fan base. I'm kind of curious where they are with you as far as, are they starting to turn that corner a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season, it would have been a different answer. They're still in the bottom third of payroll, or they were. But to the points that you just highlighted, you have no choice but to acknowledge what has been the biggest criticism of, well, they don't spend the money. They don't overpay because you have to overpay to get people to come to Seattle. Even then, they still need to want to come to Seattle, as you point out a lot. But you cannot deny what they've done. Again, we kind of knew the Julio thing was going to be a foregone conclusion. And again, I am not like glossing over that or just saying that, but we kind of saw in which direction that was going. Again, to me, the fact that when Stanton was interviewed, I want to say like 3 or 4 starts into Castillo, after they dealt for him, I was a little bit irritated because he kind of hemmed and hawed when he was asked point blank by somebody, do you see Castillo being a Mariner after 2023? And it was kind of a, gosh, gee, boy, we'd sure like to. And I just kind of went, oh, God, like they better make time in the next year and a half then. Lo and behold, whatever, a month later, 5 or 6 starts later, they extend him. So this is going to sound super odd, Jason, but like it was less of the Julio extension and for me, way more of the extension of Castillo. And of course, this is after signing the reigning American League Cy Young Award winner in Robbie Ray in the offseason. Like those are massive commitments. And I have been a critic as much as anyone else in the past, but like you cannot argue with the money they forked over for Ray, the extension they got Julio on, and somebody out there arguing, it's like, dude, it sounds like a lot of money, but like you said, Steve, it's going to be a bargain, which I do believe it will be. And then again, the Castillo thing for me just kind of helped turn the tide, so to speak. Yeah, there was a lot of me for years. Obviously, baseball is entrenched in my soul. I'm a lifer just like you. And even though I'm out of the broadcast industry and have been for a while, like clearly I follow this organization very closely. I devour baseball content. But for a while, it was just like, God, how can these guys do the things you said and oppose that arena and then turn around and be more than happy to build their own, area there where they'll take beer and food and all the other concessions for the other sports in town when the Seahawks and the Sounders, or there's a concert. Oh yeah, we're going to open up this place across the street. Like I was really kind of wrangling with that for a long time. How could that happen? Then again, it was the old guard. Chuck Armstrong was a terrible, he was a bad real estate agent from Los Angeles who somehow became a team president for the better part of 3 decades. I still don't know how that happened. Man. I still don't know why he was able to stay there that long. I mean, he was an absolute boob, right? But that's in the past. Kevin Mather, they had no choice. Okay, so I don't want to give them all the credit in the world. They were painted into a corner, did what they had to do. Let's not forget that scandal that went away involving some inappropriate behavior and some sexual assault complaints against this front office from a few years back. Like people like me have not forgotten, and I know a lot of your listeners haven't forgotten. So the Mariners' criticism that they have been taking over the last 2 decades has been fully warranted. They did it to themselves. On the other hand, okay, let's look at probably right now, what is the majority owner in John Stanton letting the baseball people do their thing, right? Now, obviously, he's the one who writes the checks and everything has to go through him, but he saw where this was headed. And let's not be, naive about this. A lot of this was dumb luck from the perspective of they had always been kind of building toward 2023, hosting the All-Star break, and those kind of things that they kind of were looking for things to fall into place. I think they got ahead of schedule. They had some young farm talent pop big, and credit them. They seized on that opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Like if Julio had been struggling, or if Gilbert had been struggling, or Kirby wasn't a thing, and they were just kind of middling, none of this would have happened, right? I think they lit the fire. They were expecting to throw logs on the fire maybe next year, but this thing just went up in a huge hurry, and they're like, oh my God, we better fuel this fire right now as opposed to next year.
And instead of sticking with their original plan because it was cheaper, they just went and did it. And I think that's the difference between this group right now, not just Jerry DiPoto and the folks that make the baseball decisions, but that ownership group. And, I kind of led you down that path as I asked that question, but that's where I am. I'm starting to turn a corner. This is what I believed they would be as an ownership group. And now we're finally starting to see it. Before we go, Steve, really quick, without tons of discussion, without a lot of conversation in terms of this matchup, do the Mariners win this series in Toronto?
Well, you have to go matchup, right? I would give the starting pitching edge at least up front with Manoah and Gossman, probably to Toronto, but not by much, right? I mean, we're talking splitting hairs. I like the Mariners bullpen better than the Blue Jays. That usually matters in a 3-game set. I wish the Mariners were at full strength. They are not. Toronto is a much different team than the one the Mariners swept back in the middle of the summer and got Charlie Montoyo fired, right? Boy, I mean, we can go down the list in terms of, which guys are going to be X factors and which ones aren't. Can they? Of course. Will they beat the hell out of me? I do think this is important to keep in mind. This did not look good at all as recently as a week to 10 days ago. They had lost 8 of 11. They had guys that were nicked up. They had guys that were pressing. They had guys that were struggling. In the last week, and I know they were meaningless games, but consider the following. They got Julio to play like he never left. It was important that he got those ABs this week. Suarez ended up heating up. Okay? So we feel confident. Haniger coming to life again. Okay? That was not the case a week ago. They obviously got their throw days on schedule with a bullpen, and every one of those guys, Munoz, Sewald, Swanson, Castillo, Brash, they all looked outstanding this week, right? They got their rotation set. Like, all of these things are usually in flux when you usually go down to the wire. So in a way, it was a blessing in disguise, and they even rested some regulars, right? Cal Raleigh used some. You saw him sparingly after, of course, he shot 21 years of crap into outer space with his home run in the 9th inning on Friday. And then I like the fact that they played a couple day games in a row before they have an off day and play a couple more day games. Like, those little things matter. Like, they're in a routine right now. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not into predictions and being like, hey, are the M's going to win? Yeah, man, because they're awesome. Obviously, they have their work cut out for them. But do I love my chances with Luis Castillo in game 1? You better believe it. Do I love my chances with that bullpen? Absolutely. Is it imperative that the regulars that contribute are playing well? Yep, and they are. Julio, like I said, looks like he never left. Eugenio's heating up, Haniger heating up. Like, those guys are going to have to carry this lineup, and it looks like they are starting to heat up. The only thing that I'm concerned about is the Blue Jays absolutely annihilating right-handed pitching. And a lot of people are concerned about Robbie Ray in game 2, and I'm like, well, I mean, the Blue Jays are good, but they're top third. They're like 5th or 6th against left-handed pitching across most of the metrics. Right-handed pitching, the Blue Jays obliterate. So that is the number one kind of like, okay, we've got right-handed smoke. We've got right-handed dominance. We've got right-handed stuff that you haven't seen against the best right-handed hitting team in the American League, maybe the best right-handed hitting team in all of baseball. Okay, Dodgers might have something to say about that, but you get the point. Like that matchup, that a plus righty in Castillo against an awesome team against right-handed pitching is going to be everything. And Castillo, when he was with the Reds, he faced the Jays in Rogers Center back in like May or something, like 6 innings, 2 runs, 5 Ks. He lost 2-1. That's totally inconsequential, but at least he's a veteran. At least he's pitched there before. Clearly the atmosphere, it's going to be like a frat party now instead of, what it was back in May or whenever the hell he pitched. But, those things are, I look at matchups when I look at this, just like everyone else. I'm obviously stating the obvious and I'm belaboring the issue, but if they can get game one and their right-handed arms are going to neutralize an awesome team against right-handed pitching in both what Castillo can do and what this pen can do. And this is where Scott Service totally ratchets things down, right? There is no such thing as a leash. Got everyone rested. It's all hands on deck. There is no leash. Scott Service ratchets it down. It's a playoff series. It's 3 games in 3 days on the road. If you need to pitch Munoz 2 or maybe even all 3 days, you do. You figure things out. Now, granted, the rules are a little different, right? And how you deploy relievers and what things come into play, obviously, are things to that he will have to consider. But let's do this and see what happens. Who knows? I would have liked to be in Cleveland, probably like everyone else. I don't want to go to, the Thunderdome, the Rogers Center there. It's going to be absolutely insane. You will see some beers flying onto the field. It's going to happen. Like, it's going to be an absolute jungle. But who knows? Sometimes that can bring a team together. Maybe it's fun to spoil a party, right? It's super fun to spoil a party. I don't care how shallow that sounds. You know me well enough to know that that's not shocking to hear me say that. So you know what? Screw it. Let's spoil their party.
Yeah, boy. The cool thing is that we're sitting here talking about it. Let's just go back to that. We're sitting here. We're not talking about a game in June. This isn't 2015. This isn't Stephen Church talking about a 40-44 team trying to turn the corner and trading for Austin Jackson to put them over the you know what I mean? Like we're sitting here talking about an actual playoff game involving the hometown 9. And I think
how long were you and I on 1090 The Fan for? Like 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I mean, how long was that show? It was 2.5 years. We did that show for 2.5 years.
Sure.
In those 2.5 years that you and I did that show together on that radio station, I think we talked about the Mariners maybe 85% of the time and the Seahawks 15% of the time. And could you imagine if the team was as good as it is now when we were doing it back then? Because that's exactly what we're talking about. We're like, God, I wonder if Lloyd McClendon, where does he fall on the analytics page? Jesus. I mean, it's like bringing back PTSD. But you're right. You're totally right. We are talking about a playoff series. This is going to be one of the most monumental weekends in recent Seattle sports history. Think about it. You are certainly in the throes of football season. I mean, God, I wish the Huskies could have pulled it off against UCLA, but their defense was atrocious. Seahawks defense was atrocious, but they were able to pull it off. But we're going to be staring down the barrel of M's and J's Friday afternoon. Imagine the feeling we're going to have if they were able to take game one going into Saturday with the Huskies and the Cougars and the Mariners and the Jays, and then into Sunday if it ends up going 3 games of the Hawks and the M's and J's and just the regular NFL Sunday. And God forbid, and I don't know if you can hear that, knocking on wood, okay, that they get past this series, what next week potentially could look like. But first things first, right? First things first, let's get through this. This is going to be an absolutely incredible sports weekend. And I used to, in my younger days, I would get really wound up and I wouldn't necessarily enjoy it as much. And this time around, I am going to soak all of it in. And sorry to go Old Man River on everybody. Just soak it in, man. Just soak it in. Enjoy this. It's fun to be in this position. It's even more fun to see the team succeed in this position. But I want to go back to what you said a little bit ago. I do think this is the start of something for this baseball organization in particular, based on the things that we talked about. This is not going to be a massive turnover. This is going to be keep your core guys. They've obviously done that through their extensions. They've got the other core guys locked up contractually. Maybe buy out the RBers of a couple players. Maybe it's Cal Raleigh, whomever, and then add some pieces. Like, I think that this feeling that we're going to have this weekend, whatever it is, and everybody fans differently, and I respect that, it is only the beginning. I do believe that down to my bone marrow.
Wow. If you'd have told me at the beginning of the year, Steve, that this is what we'd be talking about, I'd have believed you. But
Jason, if you would have told me at the start of the year you and I'd be on a podcast, I wouldn't have believed you.
Now, see, here's what's funny, because I knew I was going to ask. You didn't. I don't think I'd have believed either.
6 years. Listen, I broke a promise. I did 6 years, and this is all you get, man. I told you I'd be rusty. Yep. I told you I'd be all over the place.
You weren't rusty, though.
I kind of screamed and yelled for 20 minutes. We'll see
but that's why you're here, to scream and yell, because that's Steve Sandmeyer. We want Steve Sandmeyer. Steve, before I let you go, first of all, I do appreciate you breaking that promise. I appreciate your time here on a weeknight. You got other things to think about and take care of, so I certainly do.
No, I don't. I don't have anything else to think about, because I swear to God, I'm probably not going to sleep until the weekend. And I am pretty good at alienating my family during a very important sporting event. So I really don't have anything else to do. I appreciate the sentiment, though. Thank you.
Just in case, we'll thank Mrs. Sandmeyer anyway. So thank you, Mrs. Sandmeyer, for kicking Steve out of the room so he can come and do this, because we know that's what happened. Steve, at the end of every single episode of the podcast, and there have been over 600 episodes of Baseball Things, I thank you by name in the outro, in the close, every single time. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to use a line on you that you have used on me ever since we've known each other. And that line is, just take a compliment. Okay. You have railed on me for not being good at taking compliments. Now let's see if you're any good at it. This podcast does not exist without you. It just flat out doesn't, man. And it's not just because you lit a fire, although you did that too. It's not just because you kind of got me into it, and it's all of it. It's you lit a fire. It's you taught me a lot of things. I still think about segments we've had and things you've said to me after segments in that studio or at Milady's recording the podcast that in my head I've noted, and that has made this podcast, I think at least good for some people. There's a decent following. So we've done pretty well here. We've had a lot of fun, and I care about doing this because of you. So thank you for that. Thank you for teaching me tons of things. Thank you for teaching me that this is supposed to be fun. And that goes for baseball in general. I worked baseball for far too long, and I'm still learning how to have fun. And a lot of that is because of you. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time today. Coming on the show, breaking a promise, you big giant liar, Steve Sandmeyer, and having some fun with us today on Baseball Things. I really, really appreciate it.
Hey man, I very much appreciate what you just said, and I can take a compliment, and that means a lot to me. I will tell you this, you don't do what you do without the talent you have, and I knew you had talent, and I believe that talent is talent no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter what situation you're in. So this doesn't happen without your ability. So you understand that, and that's not being cocky. There's a huge difference between being cocky and confident. Be confident in your talent, okay? Take care of your own confidence, because if you don't, nobody else is going to do it for you. And I do remember some of the things I said, and you know it. The only thing that matters is what comes out of that speaker. It's not what mood you're in or what mood you think the listeners are in. You are talking to one person out there, even though you're talking to thousands, but you're talking to one person, and you do it better than most. 99% of podcasts out there, I rarely listen to the spoken word format anymore. I haven't listened to sports radio I think I have listened to maybe 20 total minutes of sports radio in about 3 years.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just because I did it for so long. I did it for like 2 decades that I just finally went, I've been there. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, that, this interviewer needs to go to break and they need to ask a follow-up question. Like it's like a movie, whatever, producer going to watch a movie and then in their head going, oh, the lighting on that shot wasn't good. Like I just can't get out of that rut. Plus, I just think sports talk radio commercially is ridiculous. I have a lot of friends that still do it and they're good at it. I think the majority of it sucks. I think the majority of podcasts suck. And the reason they do is because they don't have what you have. They don't have the talent, but they don't also have in the back of their mind that you truly are talking to only one person. That's how you approach it. And that's why you have a good podcast. So you son of a bitch, you take a compliment now. So how about that?
I'm going to pretend that I'm taking that compliment just so I can get out of the situation.
Yeah, typical.
I'm still really bad at it.
6 years, 6 years, and you weasel your ass way out of it. That's just standard Churchill for you.
I think everybody out there that's listening to this would admit that I don't lack for confidence, though. I think that's pretty obvious.
Okay.
But
especially on Twitter, Jesus Christ.
Sure.
I mean, you like eviscerate people on Twitter. Would you stop killing people? These are innocent women, children, men out there on that platform, and you murder people like unmercifully with no remorse.
All of that is true, except the innocent part. They are not innocent, Steve. I am the Dexter of Twitter. They are not innocent, bro.
No, it happens all the time. Like every now and then a buddy of mine will be like, dude, your boy Church is murdering people. I'm like, what happened now? Like honestly, I'll get a text. Oh my God, did you see this? And I'm like, no, what, I don't know. You know me, the only thing I use Twitter for is to be a cigar influencer. By the way, check out Cigar Concierge. Outstanding cigars. If you don't mind me throwing a sponsor onto the podcast, my boy Steve is outstanding. Find him at Seattle Cigars on Twitter. TikTok Cigar Concierge. So the only thing I do now on Twitter is I'm a cigar influencer, thanks to Jackson Bevins of Cigar Thoughts. Mm-hmm. If I can now advertise another podcast, but like literally, and that outside of that, I like knee-jerk react to games and tweet pictures of cocktail cigars and quote tweet pictures of people with beers at games. That's pretty much my existence on the social media platform. So
it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Well, whatever works, man. I'm a simple human. I'm a simple man. And had I not had a bad idea, extra IPA Thursday night against the Rangers, when you asked, I would have told you to shut up and leave me alone. But instead, I was vulnerable, and here we are.
Churchill wins again. Churchill wins again. Steve,
so be it.
Steve, appreciate it. Love you, man.
Hey, I love you too, and I love the people listening. I know there's some people out there. If you're hearing me for the first time, I truly apologize. Do not worry. It'll be another 6 years. And for the people that do listen or at least know of my past career, all that crap, I love them. Love you guys too. So keep listening to baseball things and go M's. Los Marineros.